So that's just a sign of what we can expect today. Soraya,
What happened?
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I have no idea what happened, but I'm going to assume it was something kooky.
Yeah, something kooky happened.
Hey, Jeff, do you remember this?
I do remember that.
Okay,
is
you
that
may
the
remember this. Okay, this is the original.
Oh, you're going way back.
Then we got a 40th anniversary release. And
YepRoc.
then, hold on, but wait, there's more. Then you remember this? That's
Oh,
original.
yeah. I think my mom told me about that before I was born.
Before you were born. Well, then everyone can put together who's older than who. And then we got a 40th edition beauty of Salvation Army.
That looks gorgeous. So I'm guessing
wait, there's more.
Oh my gosh. Ooh.
Hold on.
Are you gonna show vinyl?
I am going to show vinyl.
It looks
For
like
that kind of show.
it
Just
looks
get
like
just a sneak peek. Look at this beauty.
ooh, beautiful
Colored vinyl.
golden amber.
Golden amber.
It looks like an ale.
Great. Sounds like a good band name.
It does.
Golden amber. Golden earring, golden amber.
Nice. So does all of this have anything to do with the discussion we're having today?
It has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Just kidding. Yes, it has everything to do. For our listeners, Jeff, let them know who is joining us today and to talk about what.
Yeah. So I think we need a little bit of help. So we're bringing back our wonderful co-host, Ronnie Barnett.
Yep.
Always such a big help to us, and we always enjoy having him around. It's a party when Ronnie's around.
Always.
But in the hot seat, we have a couple members from that band, Salvation Army. Michael Quercio, the bassist and lead singer, primary songwriter, and Gregg Gutierrez, who played guitar. So if I'm not mistaken, Soraya, I believe that this is the first time that the two of them are on a Zoom meeting together. So this is quite special. Other than that's what I've heard from Michael. So very interesting. And we invited Troy to join us, but unfortunately he's not able to make it. So 2/3 of the band will be here to talk about this reissue, and we might dig a little bit into their past and how they all got together, and a little bit about what happened with the name. So we know that they had we've heard on a couple occasions a little bit about what happened with that. But since we're talking Salvation Army, we'll go there, and who knows what Ronnie's going to bring up. We never know. So we've done very little to prepare for this as far as working with Ronnie. So on this particular topic. So we'll see. You never know what we're going to get. So looking forward to hearing from Michael and Gregg Lewis and about Salvation Army.
Absolutely. So let's get started. Hi, this is Soraya.
And this is Jeff.
Our podcast is called Paisley Stage Raspberry and Rhyme.
A podcast where the two of us play music that we like and share anecdotes and background about the tunes.
We hope you'll join our conversation. And without further ado, a groovear.
Let's get groovy.
That means it's happening.
All right, Soraya, you want to get us started?
Yes. So for all our listeners, joining us today, guest host Ronnie Barnett, but also two members of Salvation Army, Michael Quercio and Gregg Gutierrez. So thank you all. Yeah. Oh, look at that beauty. Ooh. And I hold this up because YepRoc re-released this. It was a 40th anniversary re-release of the single. Happen 4 hours fight song. And then they gave us this. And it was another anniversary re-release of the Salvation Army. With that little curious. Yeah, and those of us in the know.
The contrast in colors. This is the new version. It's darker.
Yeah.
Is the new version darker? Really?
Yeah, it's a little darker. See that? See them side by side? Yeah.
Interesting.
But the back?
That's the new back. So yeah, it's a little. Let's
Do you
do
know
the
where that
contrast.
picture was taken? Do you see the picture?
Yeah.
That's from a backyard in Hollywood. What was Mary? Her name was Mary. She's famous. She's like a photographer or something. Mary Lewis. That was the night that El Duce threw up on me.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, it's the same night. And
Intentionally.
later on, Ed Culver took us to the backyard to take pictures after I got the vomit off of my shoes.
Well, interestingly, I got a text message from Ed Culver last night,
Oh,
and I told him about this record, and he said, "Did they use my handprint?" So it's a photograph of us standing behind a door, but then he put his handprint somehow over the image. So what you see is a hand revealing us standing behind a door.
oh, that's
Oh yeah,
interesting. Oh,
I
Oh,
wow.
never noticed that before.
really?
You can see, yeah, the lines of
never
his hand.
noticed
Yeah,
that.
wow.
So
It's
Ed
crazy.
Culver was like, did they use he described the picture in great detail, and he goes, I don't have a copy of that. I wonder, you think Lisa has the original and she'd give it back to me?
Oh,
Yeah, I mean it's there. It's
Lisa
reprinted the
Benson must,
same, but
must have it unless it's somewhere sitting at bomb for 100 years.
Right.
Wow.
wow. So Michael was freshly thrown up on by El Duce in this
Yeah,
photo,
it
and
was in the
Ed
middle of our
Culver's
show.
handprint.
He was sitting at my feet, like I was the Reissue or something. And then he threw up on me. So
and
I
Lewis,
don't know.
He
Lewis,
put
you
his
said
finger
that
down
was
his throat and intentionally threw up on Michael's Beetle boots.
No. They weren't Beetle boots. They were like these cool kind of like school kid shoes I got at the thrift store or something. Somebody were Torrance or something. But anyway, they were cool.
Louis, can you share with our listeners how you came to be a part of the band?
Sure. I feel like I'm having deja vu all over again. Yeah, so I was introduced to Michael and Troy through a mutual friend. I had been in two punk rock bands. One was the Ozzy Hairs, which had a famous skateboarder as our lead singer, Tony Alva from Dogtown, and his
Yeah.
brother, and the drummer in the band, or his brother was the lead guitar player, and the drummer was Emil, and he ended up in Black Flag later. And that was the Ozzy Hairs, and it was total punk. I think I knew bar chords and I knew one open chord at that time. I knew nothing about the guitar. And but once I learned that you could play a bar chord, you could play any song that was ever written. It opened up a whole new world for me. And we were in that band I was in that band for about a year, I guess. And then we kicked Tony out of the band, and Mark wanted to be the singer, and somehow I just left. But what's memorable about that is our very first show ever was in San Pedro, opening for, and I'm pretty sure it was the Minutemen and Black Flag and Circle Jerks.
wow.
In San Pedro. And then later I was introduced to the Stern Brothers from Better Youth Organization, and they had a band called Youth Brigade. And so I was invited to join their band, and again, another pretty hardcore punk band. And we would play at all of the sort of punk rock haunts of the day. It was a lot of fun. But at some point I just kind of decided I didn't really like their music that much. And it was around that time that I was introduced to Michael. So I went and met him at his house where they rehearsed in Michael's garage. And I guess it was an audition, and I got the gig.
Hey, I want to ask about the Ozzy Hairs again for a second. So Tony Alva was a big star then, correct?
At that time, he really was, yeah.
Yeah. Did that lead to any interesting gigs or experiences?
Growing up, I was a big skateboarder and a surfer, because I grew up in the South Bay, and so I was at the 1976 World Championships where I saw Tony Alva win the whole thing.
Wow.
And so he was sort of an idol of mine. So it was a real treat to be in a band with this guy that I looked up to for so long, but only really knew from the cover of Skateboarder magazine. And I mean, this is long before Dogtown was glorified and glamorized in movies and stuff like that. But so these guys are pretty gritty. He was a great guy. He was a little crazy. We did a lot of crazy stuff. We went skateboarding quite a bit when I was in that band.
Wow.
That was a real treat for me. Like, you know, we'd find empty swimming pools and we'd hop over the fences and go skating in the pools. And I learned a lot about skating from him because he pretty much invented, you know, pool riding, and him, Stacy Peralta and Jay Adams and people like that from Santa Monica. So yeah, that was really a lot of fun. And that was because I guess I got to punk rock because I got kicked out of my high school, which was Narbonne High School in Lomita, and I was given the opportunity to transfer to San Pedro. And sitting in the back of the class in my second period English class was a guy who was a transfer student from Japan, who was wearing, he had a Sid Vicious locket on, his hair was all spiked out, he wore black leather pants with chains on him, and to me he was a freak because I was still a surfer at that point. My hair was super long, and I remember him wearing a swastika shirt into the classroom, and it wasn't really that big of a deal, and until it was, and then he would just cover it up. But he introduced me to punk rock, and that's how I got into my first band and got into music and all that. And so, but Salvation Army was attractive to me because their music was very much rooted in the punk scene. I knew of the band. The sound was there. John Blazing was a great guitar player. He had a great tone. Michael was more, it was sort of like a Buzzcocks version of punk rock. You know, it was melodic and harmonic, and it had hooks. So it was very easy for me to be attracted to that music.
Michael, what happened to John Blazing? Why didn't he work out? And then what did he go on to do after?
Okay. John, I met John through a little that paper called The Recycler, where you would put out little ads and things, and he was my age in my grade. He was a senior at Pedro High. I was at Carson High, and Lewis went to Carson High for a week, he told me once. Didn't you?
Something like that, but I didn't like it.
And then he said, I'm not staying here. Anyway, he came over, he drove over to my house in Carson from Pedro, Johnny. And it's funny, we had both come. He was all, you know, his hair was spiked, and he was, you know, he was dressed like, you know, all punk, and it was, and beforehand he was like me. We were both in like cover bands. We had both come from cover bands doing, you know, Blue Oyster Cult and Led Zeppelin and all, you know, all that stuff. And we had learned our chops doing that, you know. And so we kind of bonded we had both gotten out of that, cut our hair, and you know, went punk rock. And we couldn't find a drummer. Him and I would sit, and I'd show him my songs and stuff. And we had Troy come and audition because Troy went to my high school, Carson, and I saw him one day just dressed. I had known him a couple of years before when I first started, and he had long hair and everything. And then, like, by the time a couple of years later, I see him at school, and I didn't even know it was him. He's got short hair, and he's dressed like one of the specials. And I'm like, who's that guy? And under his arm is the Jam's Setting Suns album. And I'm like, oh my God, it's Troy. And I'm like, wow. And Tree told me that he played the drums. And anyway, he comes over, and Johnny and I, and the three of us play, and it just didn't work. He played the drums, but I think he was only playing for like 3 days before he came over. And we tried some other people, and nobody wanted to play with us. Nobody anywhere would play with Johnny and me. So Johnny goes, call Troy again. So Troy came back, and he had been rehearsing, and he could play. And so there we were. And we went and recorded that demo of those 4 songs right over here. I was walking home from school and saw this recording studio. And we went in there, pulled our money together, and went in and made those 4 songs, and played around. I saw Lewis. We played a show with Lewis when he was in the Youth Brigade at Alpine Village, and D. Boone sees us play live, wants to hear our demo, wants to put out 2 of the songs, and then Johnny Blazing wants to leave. And we're like, what? And he wants to leave. And Troy told me later that he was driving with just him and Johnny's like, we got to get a singer. And Troy's like, what? And Johnny's like, yeah, I want to get a screamer. I want to be in a punk band. And Johnny would tell me, you know, you're getting too musical, I guess, what he was saying. You know, I got out of all that, the Beatles and this and that. I I got out of that because I want to be in a punk band, and now you're, you know, moving away from that. You know, he wanted to be in Black Flag, you know, and so even with all that stuff happening for us, he's like, I'm leaving. And so there we were with the single coming out and no guitar player. And so the drummer of Peer Group, who was his older brother, was the drummer of George Hurley from the Minutemen. His girlfriend, whose name was Anna or something like that, she knew Lewis and said, she called me. I don't even know how she got married. She goes, Michael, I have the guy for your band. I'm going to call him and give him your number. Is that okay? And it was Gregg. She goes, he just said his name is Gregg. And and then that's how it happened.
So what did you think of Gregg Lewis when he came in to audition?
Well, I'd say I didn't know. I think you were in that band Youth Brigade. And I was trying to remember them because she was saying, you know, we had talked on the phone, he was going to come over, and I was like, I remembered the Stern brothers, and I thought maybe you were one of the Stern brothers, you know, from looking on the stage. And then he drives up in a little Volkswagen, and he gets out of the car, and you know, he wasn't like some geeky guy or anything. He was very cool. So it was like, and I thought, like, you know, a rock and roll band has to look like a rock and roll band. And in a way, that was more important than how you play, really, because you can learn how to play, but you can't learn how to, you know, look cool.
Yeah.
Maybe, but it wasn't as easy. And so it was like, he came in and, you know, he could play, and we needed a guitar player. And so there we were.
Well, what kind of guitar did you have on that audition, Lewis?
It was an SG. It was my first electric guitar that I ever had. It was, you know, middle 70s, sort of an unremarkable guitar, but I still have it.
Wow.
And yeah, I got it when I was 15.
A mid 70s SG is worth like $3,000 by the way, but anyway, go on.
Well, it must have been stolen at some point, because by the time I bought it in a pawn shop, the serial number had been sawed off the back of the headstock. It had a little metal plate there. But I didn't care. It was $300 and I needed an instrument. And but I do remember, I was thinking about it, hearing Michael talk. I'm pretty sure I had an Ampeg. It may have been a V4, or it had a very unique sound. It was like a Marshall style cabinet with an Ampeg head. And so if you listen to the sound of that guitar, it's pretty tinny. There's not a lot of distortion. I think if there is distortion, it was from the amp, not necessarily from a pedal. I don't think I had a pedal back then. Do you remember what kind of amp it was, Michael? It was like a stack. It was like a half stack, I believe, of something.
It was an Ampeg.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
But you didn't like it. You bought some equipment from Johnny Blazin.
Did I?
Because Johnny would still come over when you were playing with us for some reason. I don't know, he was keeping his amp there or something. And did we call your amp the Leaning Tower of something?
Yeah, there was something. Yeah, something about
something I used to make fun of it or something. And
yeah, because it was on wheels. It was a case. It was a cabinet, and there were only 3 wheels, or one of the wheels had been dropped on the edge, and so it had been pushed up into the cabinet a little bit, so it leaned.
I called it Leaning Tower.
That's right. I had forgotten that.
That's hilarious.
But he comes in with like a Gibson SG, which is like, you know, Alice Cooper played Gibson SGs. You know, the guy he clearly had equipment. You know, it was happening.
Angus Young is the famous.
I was gonna say AC/DC. So Lewis, I've told you this before, but I have 3 guitar heroes that really influenced me. Ace Frehley was the guy that got me into playing music, and Peter Buck kind of developed my style. And I've learned so many 3 O'Clock songs that you are definitely a huge influence on me as a player. And Michael, this will lead to a question that I have for you, which is obvious. But Lewis, who are your guitar heroes that influenced you?
The first name that comes to mind is Steve Howe from Yes. He's a very articulate guitar player, very deliberate, not a lot of just rambling solos. He seemed very deliberate in the way that he played, and his parts were always sort of thought out, somewhat orchestral. If you go back and listen to a lot of his stuff, and I love classical music, and he did Mood for a Day, and he did a couple of other acoustic songs along the way. I knew I could never play like him, but I sure loved listening to the way he played. So I'd have to say he was probably the single biggest influence. But later it was Robbie Krieger from the Doors, and
Wow.
Obviously George Harrison, John Lennon for Attitude. It's like it's hard to pinpoint it to one, but it really did. I think it kind of started with Yes, because I'm 4 years younger than my next oldest sibling, and I'm the youngest of 5. So I was born in 1962. So in the 1970s, when I'm 10 and 12 and 14, they're listening to all of these British super arena rock bands, and the Rolling Stones, of course, and all the bands that were really popular, the Eagles. So I didn't grow up with punk rock music. I really did kind of grow up with arena rock and very large. I don't know. I mean, I didn't know how else to listen to music because I didn't have a record player. My brothers did. I just listened to whatever they listened to.
Oh.
Yeah.
So Michael, same question. Who influenced your bass playing and your songwriting and singing style?
A little stab on his mention of arena rock. Lewis and I were both at Cal Jam too.
Oh,
Ontario Fairground.
Together? You guys went together? Or?
No.
No.
He just said he was there, and I was there with a bunch of friends I was still in junior high, and obviously he was too. But I didn't have any older brothers. I had older cousins that would give me their records, and we'd go to Ohio to visit them, and that's how I got all the Bowie records and all that sort of stuff. And Todd Rundgren, my one cousin used to hang out with Todd Rundgren when he'd come to Cleveland, so
Wow.
I had that influence. And I was always buying records as a little kid, a little 45, and then one summer I went with my dad to visit his relatives in Massachusetts, and I met my cousin Peter, who was 2 years older than me. I was 13, he was 15. He had a motorcycle. He was like I don't know, whatever 70s movie star on steroids. And he had he was Matt Dillon on steroids. He looked like Matt Dillon, and he drove a motorcycle. And he had the most amazing record collection already. And I was so impressed that when I went home, I had to have Kiss Destroyer. I had to have Aerosmith Rocks. I had to have everything that I saw him have in his collection. And then I met a kid in school whose older brother was into this band called T-Rex, and he would go on and on about this band T-Rex, and I got into them, and I started collecting their records like you would collect comic books, and we'd go to concerts. And then on the radio, he told me, you got to listen to the station KRO2. There's this DJ at night that plays, and that's where I started hearing the Sex Pistols, and so I had to have all those records, and I'd get rides from my dad up to Hollywood to buy the 45s, and so here I am.
So
how did you?
So here I
sorry.
am.
How did you gravitate to playing bass though, Michael? Because I asked my father for a bass when I was 14, but as we all know, most kids want to play guitar or drums.
I was in junior high school I guess it was the 7th grade, and I'm in a music appreciation class. I had signed up for this, that sounds easy. It was the most boring thing on earth. It was positively purgatorial.
I took that same class at Narbonne High School.
Wow.
The second day I was like, God help me, this thing is horrible. All of a sudden, through the door in the middle of class comes this teacher from down the way, and it's like, I need people to play in the orchestra. Anybody here want to be in the orchestra? The class is the same as this one, this same time and everything. You just have to switch doors or whatever. And right away, I was like, anything to get out of here. So I remember, and then we walked in to the new class, and everybody's playing the violin or something, and he's like, well, what do you want to play? And I'm like, I'd never thought about playing the violin. And he goes, why don't you play the viola? It's like a tenor violin, like a big fatter violin. So I go, okay. if that gets me out of that crummy class, I'll play whatever you want me to play. So I started playing the viola, and I thought it was cool. And I started learning how to read. And then I met, like I said, I met my rock and roll friend who was in that orchestra. And he's like, "You got to play bass, man. We got to start a band, and you got to play bass." So I switched over to the big classical bass with the bow.
Mhm.
And then from there, my dad got me an electric bass, and that's where that started.
Wow. So your style is, you're very melodic in your playing.
I'm classically trained.
Oh,
Well, technically.
Yeah.
junior high level classically trained.
Exactly.
But yeah, but a lot of bass players will just hold down, or maybe stay on the root note or do a fifth. But
Don't talk about me like I'm not here, Jeff. All right.
I got a little music teacher apart from being in the orchestra, and both of them really taught me about the Bach, like Mel Bay,
Oh yeah.
Ronnie, the Bach,
Oh yeah.
the
Yes.
scales. And then
Yep.
when I learned the scales, it just opened me up. And when I started listening to Paul McCartney, I was like, it's all scales. It's scales, man.
Yeah.
So I started learning them, and I was like, and then when I was in bands, I was like getting bored with going thump, thump, thump. And so I would just throw the scales in, and that's that.
Nice. Getting back to Salvation Army, as we know, Johnny Blazing had the punk name. Michael, you were also Ricky
That's
Stark.
his real name.
Oh, what? Oh, really?
And my
Oh.
little friend from school's name was Jimi Hendrix. So I'm always surrounded by people with really cool names. That was his real name. Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, Johnny Blazing. Well, John Blazing.
Wow.
It's actually just a German name, Blazing.
So a born punk rocker. Okay,
Yeah,
well, you
born punk
decided to
rocker.
go under Ricky Stark. Why did you decide to go under that name?
I didn't like myself. I didn't like my name. Who could say Quercio, whatever. And so I thought that sounded punk rock or cool or something, and it didn't last long.
Okay.
But it's by the
Yeah,
time,
yeah. But by the time of the album, were you like, okay, we're getting serious now. I'm going to go under my real name.
yeah, and everybody was making fun of me. So,
And Lewis. Oh, sorry.
Right when Lewis joined is when Lisa Fancher called me from Frontier Records, like, "You want to do an album?" Because she loved that 45 that
Right.
the Minutemen put out, and then that happened real quick right afterwards.
Yeah. So you hear from her, and then how long does it take to get in the studio?
Gosh, she put us in the studio because she was like, "Are you ready? Do you guys have an album's worth of material?" And of course, I instinctively, even as a little kid, I always knew to bullshit and say, "Yeah, of course." I didn't have any songs, I did, but I could, I figured, I'll just write them real quick. But yeah, but I said, "Oh yeah, we're ready." Yeah, I was good. I was really good at that kind of, that sixth sense for bullshitting people. So, isn't that what rock and roll all is anyway? It's just bullshit.
You still got it. Now who? Okay, the producer is H.B. Lovecraft. Who was that?
Lewis?
His name was Tom Wilson, and he had produced other records for Frontier Records. He had done The Adolescents, and he may have done the first Circle Jerks record, I forget. But he didn't like me, and he didn't like Troy, and he didn't like the result of that record. So he didn't want his name associated with it. And that's why I'm sure it was Lisa who came up with the name of the producer. But he just didn't want anything to do with the record because he didn't like the product.
Lewis, did you like working with him in the studio?
I don't have a strong recollection of that. It all happened so quickly. I think we did all of the basic tracks, all of the guitars, drums, bass in 2 days. And I think the vocals were all done on the third day, and overdubs and like the keyboards that I played and that Michael played. I'm pretty sure it was all done in 3 days. So
Wow.
I don't have a sense of him at all. I don't have a sense of it being particularly, a lot of tension in the studio, at least. It was just, it all happened so quickly. I was just glad to be there and terrified at the same time.
So
what studio was it? Because there's no credit on the record for where it was recorded.
Well, if you take the Melrose exit off of Hollywood Freeway heading north, you'd make a right turn, and right there in that first block was the studio. And
It was on Heliotrope.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And I think it was called the Mad Hatter or something like that. Or later on, years later, I went to like some rave, like some big rave thing or something in the later 80s. And it was that studio, it was all gutted. And I was like, wait a minute, I've been here before. Wow. And it was that studio. It was a really big professional studio. It was a big place. It wasn't some little storefront or something.
Right. No, it's true. It was large. They had a large tracking room. They had a bathroom that was great for vocals.
I sang in the bathroom because I had read that Mary McGregor did Torn Between Two Lovers, and that she insisted on singing in the bathroom, and like others, like Jim Morrison sang in the bathroom. So you got to understand her. I wasn't playing with a full deck, but so I decided that I had to sing in the bathroom. So there I was singing in the bathroom.
Nice.
And then Tom Wilson, of course, he was mad about that. He was angry about that, but I insisted. So.
Mary McGregor, big influence on the Salvation Army.
Yeah.
You heard it here first. Yeah.
Louis, I was wondering about the songwriting process when Michael brought in these songs, and relatively quick, I guess, after Lisa invited you guys to record an album. What were your thoughts about his songs, and what was your input into like writing the guitar parts? Were you just playing along with what Michael had, or?
No, he would, because he didn't play guitar well or much at all. He was very good at scales and writing on the bass, and he wrote all the songs on the bass. He would fill in all those holes instead of just resting on the root note 1-4-5 or whatever. He would fill in all these gaps, and so that's what he would present to me, if I remember correctly. And at that time, I was discovering, discordant sounds and dissonant sounds and open strings, and so I would just find a way to make my guitar chords conform to what he was doing. So there wasn't a strong sense of major or minor chords, but there's a lot of open chords that ring out, and you can hear it if you listen to the guitar playing. So I would just listen to the songs, learn the songs, and just come up with parts along the way that I thought complemented what he was doing, and also complement the vocal at the same time. It was a very interesting process from the very beginning.
Nice. So I guess we should mention the band name. That didn't last too long. I mean, it didn't last too long after this album or even before the album came out.
Well, we couldn't think of a band name, and I thought, well, if Red Cross can be Red Cross, let's be the Salvation Army. It sounded better than Goodwill. So I wanted to be some charitable organization too. So I thought Red Cross was good. Who didn't think Red Cross was cool, So
right.
That's interesting you say that, Mike, because we could have been St. Vincent de Paul, right? But there's now like a really hot female guitar player named St. Vincent.
Yeah.
So, you were way ahead of your time, my friend.
Yeah, and it had the word Army in it, and all the punk bands were Army something, or or War.
Red Army, and
so it just sounded
Black
okay.
Flag.
And it didn't dawn on me that it belonged to somebody else. I mean, hello, but
and Lisa never brought that up either. Like,
no,
no,
it was like, which is odd because record companies say, yeah, she never, she made that record cover with the big title on it.
Yeah.
And the only reason the organization saw us, it knew about us, is because there was a big sign on the whiskey. We were, Salvation Army, and I forget who else, the Bangs.
I thought it was 45 Grave.
Was it 45 Grave? Where they found.
I have a photograph of that.
So the big marquee.
Yeah.
Whiskey, but that also speaks to the thinking, the ambition of the band was not grand, right? So by very virtue of the fact that Michael is saying, Red Cross, why not the Salvation Army? Never thinking that we would get their attention, just goes to show you that we weren't really thinking beyond the garage parties, and that sort of thing. Alpine Village came along, Rodney Bangenheimer came along, and it all just sort of blossomed in a very fast way, like in a very short amount of time.
Wow.
So you know, it's in hindsight, it's obvious that they would come to us and say, you can't use our name.
How long after the record came out did you hear from the Salvation Army?
80, it may have been late in 82, maybe 83.
I mean, a few months, like, what was the album out? Like a while, or?
Before Danny Benair had joined. So it was like June 82.
Yeah. We were performing at the Dancing Waters in San Pedro, which was a big punk rock and alternative music club back in the early 80s. And the lawyer came up to me backstage and handed me the letter telling us to stop using the name. And it was very disorienting. It's almost like, you know, you're getting your car stolen and you like wonder, where did I put my car? I've had my car stolen before. It was very unsettling and disorienting to have a guy in a suit walk up and basically hand you a very legal looking letter telling you to cease and desist using that name, the Salvation Army. It took a minute to sink in.
I would imagine.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, didn't see it coming.
So in our last couple minutes before we leave, I wanted to talk a little bit. Ronnie noticed the differences in the cover. There's also some other differences in the record. Isn't that right, Ronnie?
That's right. I didn't bring it up, but yeah, Jeff, there is. I'm listening to it, and I know this record very well. Listened to it over the years, and Mind Gardens comes on. It's immediately jarring to me because it's the single version, which sounds a lot different than the album version. Who dropped the ball at YepRoc on that?
Well, I don't know. It just kind of got past the censors. I don't know if it happened at the factory or what, but so you're getting the first ever time on an LP, the 45 single version of Mind Gardens. So, and that'll never happen again because this was a very limited release. So,
right,
instant collector's on it.
Yeah. So there you go. We'll look at it as being special.
It's a limited edition.
Did you know this album was getting reissued, Lewis?
No, I didn't.
Where's your copy? Do you have your copy handy?
Me?
Yes.
No, I don't. No, I don't have a copy. Danny Benair reached out to somebody at YepRoc, and apparently it's in the mail. But, now that I've spoken with Ed Culver, I'm going to try and get him a couple of copies too, because I know he'd really like to have it. He's a very interesting guy. I mean, he's working on his third photojournalism book of punk rock and just alternative music in the LA scene from like, I don't know, late 70s all the way through bands like Poison and Rat and bands like that. I mean, he was really right there all the time. And there were other photographers that were as present, but nobody as sort of penetrating as Ed Culver was. And I've been to his house. He lives in Highland Park. His first book is called Blight at the End of the Funnel. And he's just an odd dude. I mean, he's sort of like a photographic version of Howard Finster, if you know that reference.
Yeah, absolutely. REM artist.
Yeah, he's a really unusual guy, but he's a hell of a nice guy. I just ran into him at a restaurant about 10 years ago, and I'm wearing a business suit because that's what I do these days. And I'm like, Ed? And he's super tall. He's probably like 6'4", 6'5". And it was as if we just never stopped talking to each other. It'd been like 25, 30 years.
Wow.
So, I deviated from the question, but I hope I answered it.
No. Ed's name is on all sorts of records.
It came out very quickly. It was like, we got to get this done if it's going to come out on a record store day or whatever. And I just kind of said, okay, and made these decisions. And then, so getting a hold of everyone and kind of getting them involved, it didn't happen for the Salvation Army.
Oh, getting back to YepRoc. No. Yeah. I generally am removed from those types of conversations and decisions. I leave it to the keeper of the flame, Mr. Danny Benair. And I mean that with all sincerity and respect, and admiration, but he really, he is. And he introduced us to YepRoc, and he's involved in those types of decisions. More so, way more than I am.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, it looks like we only have a few seconds left, and I really wanted to thank you guys again for coming back. We didn't mention that this is it's a redo since the first version didn't record.
The
So
red light is on. The recording light is still on, right?
indeed. But I wanted to thank you guys so much for coming on. Thank you, Ronnie, and thank you, Lewis and Mike,
course.
both.
Thank you for
Thank you, guys. Great seeing you all.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so very,
Thank
very
you.
much.
Yeah.
And we recorded this time.
Yay!
Thank God. Well, let's talk again next Wednesday anyway, huh? This is fun.
Thank you guys. Thank
All right.
you. I
Bye,
appreciate
you
it.
guys. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Never forget again.
Bye bye. I'm gonna record even when we don't want to be recorded. So the
Right.
I'm
good
gonna record all day.
yeah.
All right. 2 quotes. 2 that
Yeah.
stood out. It's all scales. It's all scales, man. Who knew that Michael Quercio could synthesize playing rock music too? It's all scales, man. Who knew?
Well, all bass players, Soraya. No.
Sweet Jesus. If I'd have known that, I would have continued with my
Yeah.
music class that
I know. I felt bad. I wanted to apologize to you, Soraya, for all the technical stuff we got into there. But
No, I liked it. I liked it because I had a question. But
Yeah.
the other quote that I wanted to bring up is from Ronnie Barnett, and he goes, "You heard it here, folks. Mary McGregor influence on the Salvation Army." Okay, but my question here for the two of you, since you guys play, is the point that Lewis brought up about the distortion coming from the amp and not from a pedal. I mean, is that pretty much general for punk rock? I mean, remember, I don't know nothing about nothing, but is that pretty much the essence?
Well, I'm barely a notch above what you, Soraya, when it comes to knowing technical stuff about this. But if you hear a hum in your amp, you start checking chords and pedals and yeah, whatever. So that's all there is to that. Like that's why he said it wasn't the pedal, because he checked the pedal. So there's some hum in his amp, which again, you're only going to hear that between songs, right? When you're playing like loud guitar,
Right.
you're not going to hear that hum.
Got it.
Yeah. But I didn't know
But,
if he was talking about that or actually like the gain or overdrive. So to give it that little grittiness. I don't know a whole lot about that either. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody that I know intentionally wants distortion, so they get a pedal that says distortion right on it.
Right.
But I know D Boone, for example, he would do all treble and turn down all of his bass, and it would overdrive, so it would have that, it would break up the sound of the guitar so it wouldn't sound clean. It would have that little bit of distortion, but there's that part of it too. So
I would have Kim do the dials on whatever amp
yeah,
I was using. So yeah,
my buddy does that for me too. So I'm kind of
but
in the same
yeah.
boat you, Ronnie.
But it's interesting you mentioned all the treble and the clean, because Lewis and him talking about Steve Howe and stuff. They're all clean guitar players, right? They're not; those guys don't play through a lot of distortion and stuff. And,
Right.
And like I said, well, as the listeners know at this point, that was round 2. And yeah, in the talking about Steve Howe, like I said in the first one that like he's actually more influential on punk than you know. Like one of the biggest Steve Howe disciples is Bob Stinson from the Replacements. And if you listen to the Replacements, you'll hear it now, Jeff. Listen to his solos. It's pure Steve Howe licks.
Really?
Yeah. Let's listen to some
Yes.
Replacements tonight. You'll see what I mean.
Wow.
But I'm glad the guys agreed to do it again, right? You guys, because
Yes.
we got some stuff out of them today we didn't get in the first one, and there's some stuff in the first one that we didn't get today, but I think we hit the important parts.
Yeah. I feel like the second session actually went over a little bit better. So like you
Yeah,
said,
I do too.
if we do this every Wednesday, by the time we get to the summer, we're gonna have this nailed down with Salvation Army. So
I think so
And
too.
don't forget, the best vocals are in the bathroom. So somehow we need to get that bathroom vibe into our recording.
It was interesting that Michael said the producer, they fought over that. So Michael must have like insisted on it, and then Tom Wilson was not into it, but did it anyway, right? Or
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I seem to recall Michael also mentioning something similar when they were recording. Was it 16 Tambourines, Jeff? He mentioned it too. Like it happened to be that in the recording studio there was a space, and I don't know if it was a kitchenette or a bathroom, but he recorded video audio in there too. He recorded vocals in there too, because it was something about the room and the way it carried. So I go, little known trick, folks. If you got a band and you want to record an album, look for
That's kind of
the great acoustics.
That's kind of the lost thing with all this home recording now is you're not in a big room where the engineer's like, hey, we should try this
Right.
in this room, or you know what I mean? Like now you plug into somebody's iPad or whatever and
Right.
record, you know.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that kind of thing used to be kind of you'd experiment a little more when you're in a big studio with a lot of with some options like that. Yeah.
And then how about that? 3 days. This bugger. 3 days.
Yeah. One of those days is mixing, right? Like or two, he said 2 days recording, 1 day vocals.
And overdubs.
And all from a BS answer. You got to give credit to Michael Quercio for BSing that. Lisa Fancher, do you have an album? Of course I do. And what I love is Michael Quercio saying, yeah, you know, so I just figured I'd write them out.
Yeah.
Okay, those are the people that I just go, do they never notice how good they are at what they do? That they just say, yeah, you know, I can, how many songs are on this?
10.
10. I can write 10 songs. Yeah, no worries. Well, and we're going to knock it out in 3 days.
Look, 2 of them were from the single. One's an instrumental, one's a cover. So let's not give them too much. I'm just kidding.
But still.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, just kidding. Really, it's a great record.
I found that super interesting.
And we should mention this from the first one too. Like we talked a lot more about Lisa Fancher's influence in the first one. How she came up with this cover. She came up with the name of H.P. Lovecraft. She put him in the. She did everything. Yeah,
the detail of the hand.
Yeah,
the detail of the hand is incredible. I never noticed that. Yeah.
That is so wild. But yeah, Lisa Fancher would make decisions and then tell the band what she did. Those were some of the anecdotes that came out in the first time.
Yeah, she was like an old school record like executive, but just on a smaller scale.
Yeah.
I mean, like hold on, I'll come back to it, but
no.
It was the cover, right? Hold on, I'm going back through my notes. But yeah, Lisa would just kind of make decisions. She would do things without asking. That's what I wrote down.
And then let them know. Yeah.
Just like when this was released, then Salvation Army goes away and it's re-released as before the 3 o'clock. That was Lisa Fancher saying, I'm going to reissue it in 1985. She just does it.
And she came up. Name. Yeah.
She came up with that before with the spelt with the FOUR, and Lisa Fancher's a genius. Let's face it. I heard Frontier Records is one of the best labels ever, right?
Yeah.
And then in the previous gathering, I won't say recording, but the previous gathering, this was supposed to be black and white.
That's right.
And then Lisa Fancher said, no color. Boom.
It was the right decision.
I think this is what sets it apart.
Yeah. I mean, not that we know it like this, so it's hard to like go back and imagine, you know, of course we're not going to like it any other way, right? At this point.
Right.
But yeah, you know what that they mentioned things happen fast. They probably talked to Lisa, went in the studio a month later. This album was probably in their hands a month and a half after that. You know what I mean? That's how quick things would happen then. You weren't like, you have to do this setup, like, well, the press needs it 3 months ahead of time. And you got to set this date, and blah, blah, blah. Like this came out as soon as they got it or whatever, you know what I mean? Those are the days.
And that was also the philosophy, I think, of Lisa Fancher, of constantly striking while the iron was hot. Because when you think about those Frontier releases, they were coming fast and furious. And I think it was a lot of, because there was a local buildup, you know, thanks to Rodney, thanks to the local scene, these bands were getting a lot of play. And she was just like, okay, boom, come, record, album.
Everything was fast and furious then, right? Like it was, I don't want to sound like an old guy, but you go to the record store literally every week and there'd be a rack full of new records that you want to do. And I'm talking classic records. Like, you know what I mean? Like Yeah, it was an amazing time. One thing we didn't get into this time was Gregg Gutierrez becoming Lewis. The whole name thing. Are there any notes on that, Soraya?
When we've talked to him before, so he's used Gregg and then Lewis. And if memory serves,
Yeah.
Gregg is the middle name, and then he used it as a first name, and then he switched.
Yes. I wonder, did he grow up Gregg? Was he Gregg in high school? You know what I mean?
Right. That I don't have notes on.
Yeah. I'm thinking he probably was, since he started as Gregg and then, went with Lewis after that. So
So in
speculating.
our little circle down here near San Diego, he used to sign some of our records, G. Lewis Gutierrez. So we used to call him Glewis because the G Lewis. In our little circle, he was known as Glewis. So
nice.
Hopefully that doesn't
probably
get
good
back.
you didn't bring that up. Yeah.
No. Just between us three here.
Yes.
Just between us and no one else. No one's listening.
No.
Yeah.
And then I did want to mention personally, and we did talk a little bit about that. Lewis brought it up that Michael had came up with the locking groove at the end of Going Home, where you play it. And I think they were influenced by Sgt. Pepper's, they might have said, where at the end, I think Lewis was telling us that Michael did some shakers and stuff. And then on the original pressing, the needle just gets stuck in this groove, and it's an endless loop. And they didn't do that on the reissue for whatever reason. I don't know if nobody knows. They didn't
look. Let's face it. They didn't notice. They didn't notice they were using the wrong version of Mind Guard. So much less are they paying attention to having a locked groove. Sorry.
Well, then it's. Go ahead, Ronnie.
No, I just want to say David Bowie Aladdin Sane has a great lock groove at the end of it too. There's a lot of them out there, but go ahead, sorry.
All I was going to say is something that we weren't able to reiterate this time around, but in the first go around, is that this is going to get another remastered release, thanks to the great Bill Inglot, who and then we were given a date, but I can't confirm it yet, of April 23rd, another record store day release.
Yeah, I think that date is for the Borough Codown. Borough Codown is coming out, and so is 16 Tambourines.
So I had written down 3 o'clock and Salvation Army, all remastered. Bill Inglot has remastered the catalog. So we'll
We'll see how that happens. I don't
exactly.
Yeah, but that's what we were told last time. Yes. Yeah. And that only includes up through Arrive Without Traveling,
I believe.
Yeah. They would own the other stuff and not the major label stuff.
Right.
So
yeah. And then Ronnie, something that came up very unexpectedly during our first session was when you asked Lewis about his impressions of Vermilion, which was,
I forgot that last time. Yeah, this time.
So, do you happen to recall Lewis's response when
I do? I said, Lewis, have you heard? And what do you think of Vermilion? And he said, I've not heard it. I certainly didn't buy it. And Michael looked a little uncomfortable, but I know that's a polarizing record, but I'm obsessed with just the story of Vermilion.
You are, yes.
I just the whole story, how it came about, Prince, major labels. It's just, one day I would like to do a comprehensive Vermilion episode. Yeah.
Yes. So that is something that we've definitely talked about, and we know that Danny is definitely interested in that.
Oh yeah, no, I've mentioned it, Danny. I envision it to like the Grammy Museum with a panel. I don't think we can get booked there, but anyway, like that's what I envision. Yeah.
And if Prince were around, we could invite him to speak to it.
Oh, absolutely. And there'll be a lot of good Prince. They cover, if the listeners don't know, they cover a Prince song on there. They were on his label Paisley Park. I think he kind of saved them to a certain extent from at least getting one more record out of them, right? Like, not that it, you know, was necessarily successful.
Yeah,
But
that's something I would definitely like to learn a little bit more about. In that record being the end of the Salvation, or I'm sorry, as the 3 o'clock in that iteration, right?
yes,
And I mean, they've shared that they were, it was very unhappy times. There's some photos that they've shared during the Vermilion times. I'm really intrigued to learn a little bit about that and what was going on with the band and all that. So
yes,
hopefully that will come someday. So that was the end of Michael's band, and what we're talking about today is the beginning, right? The pre 3 o'clock
yes.
days. So anyways, this record's pretty easy to find. I'm sure your record store has some of these reissues probably still around, Ronnie.
No, these are gone. But I think
Online,
know,
it's certainly
if
easy.
you,
Yeah.
there's still some floating around online. I mean, it was an edition of 1,000, I believe. So
1100.
1,100. So find it now, folks. But they're still out there now.
Yep.
And to quote Michael Quercio, instant collector's item
Yeah.
because of the use of the 45 version and a couple of other things that we all noticed.
Yeah, but that is a true statement. It's the first time that Mind Gardens is on a 12-inch version. So
It's true. It's true.
even
For
if it was
that alone.
unintentional and a huge mistake.
I just, like I said in the first go around, like, I'm just shocked. I've been sitting on this. I when the album came out, I messaged Jeff, who was in Denver, and said, "Oh my God, there's."
I had no idea.
I think I messaged you too, Soraya. Yeah.
Yes,
I'm
you
just
did.
like, yeah. I'm like, oh my God, and then no one has brought it up in the 3 o'clock group. And I even like have done comments when somebody's like in the 3 o'clock group on Facebook, like, just got this reissue. I'm like, have you noticed the, you know? So I didn't want. I was saving the information for this. You know, I've never busted it out in the group, even though I wanted to, because you guys know me. Yeah, and I'm not mad at the guys in the band. I consider this an executive mistake. You know. So anyway.
Yeah.
And again, as we talked about, now these days pressing plants they're overloaded, and if you reject a test pressing, they wouldn't have made their Black Friday record store day street date. It would be like 6 months later, and I
Right.
think that has a lot to do with not only that, but a lot of records that might be of not of high quality new records that people might get these days. Yeah.
So that if they rejected the test pressing, Ronnie, you're saying that they would get pushed back in the queue. They wouldn't like throw them right back up front.
Yeah, I mean they'd probably get a little higher priority, but it wouldn't be. We'll have them in 2 weeks. Yeah. I mean, not for, especially not for even a big indie label like YepRoc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens in April with more reissues. I doubt
Baroque
Salvation
Hoedown.
Army. Yeah.
I think
At
these are going
least.
to be okay because Danny would have gotten a test pressing when everybody else did.
Yeah.
You know, as opposed to Salvation Army where he got it later. And
Yeah.
And yeah. Anyway, Danny congratulated me for being the first to notice. Because Danny was the one that noticed in the 3 o'clock camp, but it was too late by then.
Yeah. Not being part of the Salvation Army, he wasn't included in that test pressing approval process.
Yeah.
Right?
Though, as we talked about in the first one, he was hanging around. He was a fan, and he visited the studio, and he was that's when he was dating Lisa, and then he had a first row seat to all this and was angling to get in there.
Yeah.
Which he did, as we know. So.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, you guys. Well, I thought this was, like I said, I thought the second go around was you mentioned, Ronnie, we got some information that we didn't get around to talking the first time around. So this was great.
Yeah.
I appreciate you guys joining.
Thank you
again.
so much, Ronnie.
Yeah.
Oh, of course. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me along as usual. I love. I'm sorry if I talk too much, but
No.
And I don't mean to interrupt you guys, but there are times where like something needs to be asked.
And we appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, y'all. Thanks for having me, and I will see you soon.
All right, Ronnie.
All right.
And I'll leave, and you can talk about me. Okay.
All right.
Bye, y'all.
Bye. So, Soraya, did you hear Ronnie? No. I'm just
I love it when his Texas accent comes out.
yeah, that comes every once in a while. You hear that come through.
Every time. All right, y'all. I love that.
Yeah,
Jeff, we learned a lot today.
we did.
And I think this story of the beginning, right, it's such a compelling story. And it tells, excuse me, it also tells a compelling tale of a transitioning scene in LA. I mean, think of how this band sound, you know, when you think back, Michael shared that quote from Johnny Blazing of, we need a screamer, we need somebody else. You're too musical, you're too melodic. And I think, you know, it just shows that this band kind of had its finger on the pulse of something transitioning. And, you know, in our first go around on this topic, Louis talked about his own evolution as a player, as a guitarist, of, you know, kind of beginning in a punk band, kind of learning Salvation Army, learning more, transitioning to learning more, being much more experimental in 3 o'clock, then into his other bands, Battery Acid, Mary's Danish, of really evolving. And, you know, I think it's absolutely, it's true. You know, here we see the beginnings of what we're going to see in the 3 o'clock.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is the development and evolution of them as a band, but also of especially Michael and Louis as musicians. I just think it's an interesting piece of this story.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Yep.
Oh my gosh. You and I never tire of talking to either.
No.
So, you know, it's always fun.
Absolutely.
All right, mi gente. Agruviar.
Groove on, Paisley people. We recorded it. We recorded it this time.
It's all the scales, man. It's all scales.